Bob, talk about a little bit about recoupment. Let's explain to people what that means and how it works.
Well, recoupment is basically the publisher getting back the money that it has spent to acquire the rights. So the publisher will typically make an advance of some kind. In the sample agreement that we have, there's advances that are laid out. And then until that money comes back in, the artist or the songwriter is not getting royalties, is not getting
anything.
Well,
from the publisher.
Well,
I mean, can they recoup out of any income source? How does that work?
Well, it depends on the agreement. It depends
Okay.
on how grabby the publisher is getting, because sometimes it can only be that the writer is not getting, if it's a co-pub deal and the writer is getting part of the publishing, the writer won't get that part of the publishing until there's a recoupment. The writer will still be getting writer's share. There's also this concept of cross-collateralization, which some agreements will incorporate, under which any income at all is subject to recoupment prior to the songwriter getting paid.
Okay, so if they advanced you $10,000 on what you thought was your hit song, and your B-side ends up making all the money, they can recoup the money from the B-side, not from the tune that they went you the money on.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
That they could recoup from any
From
source.
any source.
From any source whatsoever.
Okay.
And obviously, if you're a writer, you want to try to avoid that kind of situation with your publisher, and it's just a matter of bargaining power as to how badly you need the advance and what you're willing to agree to.
So what would your advice be to a writer who came to you and said, I'm getting this great big advance, and you look at the contract and you're thinking, this contract is really no good. Will you advise a client and to take less money? I mean, that's the balance, right? How much money are you going to get paid? And the more money you get paid, the more you give up. And
risk return.
Yeah. So what's the best balance there?
Well, I think the writer is always going to be more optimistic about the future prospects than a neutral observer will be, because the writer thinks, I'm the next John Lennon and this is going to go to the top of the charts, and very few people are the next John Lennon. And so, I typically am very cautious in advising clients about taking a big advance now in exchange for a lot of things down the road, because particularly the publisher has drafted this agreement in a way that is favorable to the publisher.
Sure.
And if they put a big advance number in it, it's because they know they're going to make more money down the road by offering that big advance now and taking more rights for the future. So I typically would advise a client to be very skeptical of a large advance.
And can I
Yeah, please.
differ?
Of course.
It's very fact specific, because someone once told me, if you have a client who's putting water on their cereal, they need more money. So it depends on where the client is at that point in their life and their career. If someone is looking to buy a house or perhaps a recording studio, in that case, they may want a bigger advance because they have an immediate need, and the notion is they'll be able to roll that back into their career. Obviously, if the client is looking to maintain more control or have a bigger piece of the back end, that's the risk return, then you look for, it's not so much the size of the advance, it's really whether or not you do a co-publishing deal or an administration agreement. You always, if you decide to do a co-publishing agreement, you always go for the biggest possible advance. I don't think that varies because
the other publisher is bearing some of that risk.
Yes. And the other thing is, sometimes we'll say, well, if I don't get such a big advance, they'll like me better, or whatever it is. The bigger the advance, typically, the more the company is invested in you, and perhaps the harder they'll work. So again, it depends on whether or not, if you're concerned about the split, whether it's 75-25 or 80-20 or 85-15, which when we get to administration agreements, that can be, then you'll take a smaller advance in exchange for giving less copyright and less of a percentage. If you have an immediate need for the money, or there are certain publishers that will not do an administration agreement. They insist on having, they say, we're not in the rental business. We have to have ownership. And if you are going to look for us to do, and we'll talk about this, some of the why people do a publishing, which is certain services, they will say, we will not perform a song plugging function, going out and finding an artist to record, unless we own it. Unless you partner with us and give us a piece of the copyright, we will not do that. So those are sort of the factors that are in play: need for money, back-end participation, and what services a publisher can possibly render, and what you give up for them to do that.
Can you tell when you look at an agreement whether the publishing company thinks this is a one-hit wonder or a long-term artist? Is there a difference in the way that contract looks?
They go for all they can. And there are times, and I have done deals for specific songs. Last year, someone bought, under a Songwriter situation, bought one of the top 50 songs, and they paid 7 figures for it. And that was obviously specific to that. Other times, they are getting into the business because there's a hit song, and there is money coming in. It's very hard to get a publishing deal unless they see money coming down the pike. So you know that that's what's driving it, but there's also a belief if you've written one hit song, you've got a second one, a third one, a fourth one in you. But they'll stack it based on that particular song. Do you want me to get even a little bit more complicated?
No, let's leave it there for
Okay.
the moment, and we'll see if people come back and ask us questions. But so when somebody comes to you and they've got they've already got a record that's beginning to chart, isn't it better if the longer they hold out, the more bargaining power they have, assuming that it keeps climbing up the chart?
Big assumption.
Okay.
Big
Do
assumption.
you ever tell a client, you know what? I know you want to sign this deal. Give it another 2 weeks and you can get, I think we could do better?
We never tell a client what to do.
Okay.
Because we all of our clients are highly intelligent.
Sure.
So we sort of weigh the alternatives and say, if you believe it's going to go up and you're confident and you don't have an immediate need for the money, wait. If, on the other hand, you want, and we've also done this, we will tell a publishing company, take the deal off the table right now so that nobody else is trying to get in business with them. Make us a really good offer right now, which is probably above what it should have been. We will do a deal then and there.
Okay.
Otherwise, I've had a client who, again, needed to buy a house and provide for his mother. And so we did a deal early on. It turned out to be a great deal for the publishing company. The difference, though, with probably publishing and record deals and other types of deals, it doesn't matter the size of your advance. It's still a 75-25 split of income. So whether you get $1,000 or $100,000, it's not going to alter, unlike in a record deal where it alters the back end, whether or not there's success going on or not. If you see a record, there's certain records that get picked up by record companies because they see activity. In those cases, they'll pay a lot more. In this case, it doesn't vary the splits. It may vary the advance amounts. So I'm less concerned about the timing of it. I'm also more concerned about who the publisher is.
Sure. Yeah. Let's go on to look at an administration agreement. We see here the writer owns 100% of the copyright, and the administrator gets some negotiated percentage. So the writer ends up getting 100% of the writer's share plus a remainder of the publisher's share, which could be, 90%, right? I mean, the administration deals can be pretty much whatever the artist. I would imagine an artist like Paul McCartney or Paul Simon or Sting could negotiate a fairly nice administration agreement where the publisher who's doing all the work is getting only a tiny sliver of that income.
Those deals may be 95-5 splits
Really?
of income.
Really?
I mean, the standard, at least the administration agreement splits are 85-15 or 80-20 seem to sort of be more in the pocket. But for the more established acts, such as those, there's certain companies that will do a 95-5 split because the volume is so great. The other thing that you can also do when you talk about a song that's some success, that they're doing a deal focused on that song, and you see it's already happening, you'll do a 90-10 split for that particular song, and the rest of the songs that come in will be 85-15 or 80-20.
I see.
There's a lot of play and a lot of fun you can have in these areas. You can tell, I can't write songs, but I enjoy doing this negotiation process, so
tell.
you sort of try and tailor it.
So let's talk about how these fit into various points in your career. Would anybody want a songwriter deal? Would anybody, who could benefit from an actual 50-50 split? Is there anybody that you think could benefit from that kind of a deal? You're probably going to say it depends on the publisher and it depends on the, right? I mean, I would imagine, that a really good publisher who's got really good connections into the genre that you happen to write in could find you artists to record your song in a way that you probably never could. And for that, it's probably worth signing a songwriting deal, but in that case, you'd want to limit it to, right? You'd want to say, we'll do this for a certain amount of time, so you're not I'm kind of talking. I'm waiting for you guys to jump in.
Let me jump in there and say, in those cases, I wouldn't do a songwriter's deal. What I would do, it's when they procure a cover, which is when you have another artist record the song that you've written. So the normal split is 75-25. I'll say in a cover situation, the split becomes 60-40. So you give up 15%, and the publisher, because they've done the work and secured the cover, gets a bigger piece. I typically have a hard time doing a songwriter's agreement. I just don't think anyone should give up 100% of their copyright. In the world of film and television, that's a different
Right.
world. But in the
Right.
world that we typically are talking about in this sort of room, I just have a very, very philosophical issue with giving up 100% of your copyright. So I think the play is, again, really in the splits at how you can do that.
Bob, any comments on that?
No, I really have never seen a client who comes in with a straight songwriter agreement
Really?
with
Okay.
assigning away their copyright. No,
All right.
and people are constantly terrified that that's what they're signing. You know, they say, you know,
Yeah.
can you tell me that that's not what this deal is? Because I've heard that that's what these songwriter deals are,
Yeah.
and they're not. But it's very hard sometimes in reading an agreement to know exactly how it is going to work out.
Yeah.
But I've never actually had a client come in with a deal like that.
Okay. All right. Good. So
Well, they can be freaked out because there are no pure songwriter deals, but there are some companies that will initially do a songwriter deal and then give you back half of your copyright because for some chain of title cockamamie reasons. So that could be the reason that they're sort of freaking out. But I've never seen a contract that's any time within the last 50 years.
Well, it's very common in film and television, right?
Oh,
I mean,
that's all work for
in
hire,
film and
sure,
television. You're giving the company everything. They're granting you back the right to collect the writer's share of performance rights, and maybe there's some other things. We're going to talk about that in the second webinar webcast that goes on today.